Let's bring in political analyst Michael Geoghegan joining us for more on this. He joins us from Williams Lake, BC. Good evening and thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's make a start with the fight over these bills, C-48 and C-69. The Senate has passed them, as we know, but of course Alberta says it'll take it to court. How strong do you think is Alberta's case in this case?
Well, it'll be interesting to see because certainly in terms of the Constitution, provinces have certainly argued that they should have primacy when it comes to natural resource exploration and development, etc. And certainly Jason Kenney is making the argument that our ability to get diluted bitumen to market is being actively hampered here, both by the government of Canada and by the neighboring province of British Columbia. So they're definitely going to use all their legal tools at their disposal in order to make their case.
But it's not just Alberta, as we see, Michael, you'll agree. We've also heard from provinces such as Saskatchewan and Ontario that have weighed in on criticism on these bills. Is this just posturing before elections, you feel, or the federal government has really alienated some of these provinces?
I think it's genuine in terms of the alienation that's being felt, particularly in Alberta, and I would say to a lesser extent in the other prairie provinces. But certainly, with regards to the nature of this legislation, it is seen as working against the idea, for example, that the Conservatives have championed of having an east-west energy corridor, where presumably you'd have pipelines and other infrastructure in that corridor. So, I mean, it's certainly playing into very much a big difference between the Conservative and the Liberal approaches to managing our economy and imagining our resource sector.
OK, Michael, let's shift our focus now and talk about politics within the state of Ontario. We've seen how Dean French, viewed as the most powerful unelected official in Doug Ford's orbit, has resigned. Would you believe it's because of the revoking of some of the appointments?
Yeah, the problem with Dean French is that as a political staffer, far too often he became, if not part of the story, actually right front and center of the story. And you've got a very, very limited shelf life in government if you start being at the center of political stories. It makes you extremely vulnerable. The whole point of being a political staffer is to wield influence while remaining out of the spotlight. And those that last the longest are the ones that are able to do that most successfully. So from that standpoint, he got himself into a series of controversies that embarrassed the Doug Ford government. And then you had the latest straw with two appointments, one, a friend of his son's that didn't seem to have much in the way of a resume, and the other, a cousin of his wife's. And it was seen at that point, again, creating embarrassment. He had to go. So a year into the Doug Ford government, he's gone.
Yeah, and there were some of those expensive appointments as well, Michael, you'll agree. But let's talk a little more about how French was disliked even amongst the senior PC officials and staffers. We've seen some senior ministers who have also been demoted, or so to say. But does his departure possibly open up the Conservative government to more success in Ontario?
I think so. There's certainly some, controversial ideas that he championed, like doing a bunch of radon dispensaries the day after recreational cannabis became legal. Things like that. So, and there were certainly reports of him, reducing one MPP to tears in caucus and clashes with cabinet ministers. So if they can bring in a chief of staff who, in a sense, can provide a more traditional role, sound advice, and actually, enhancing caucus solidarity, then certainly that would allow the Doug Ford government, I think, to recover somewhat from a series of stumbles.
All right, political analyst Michael Geoghegan, pleasure talking to you this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.